皆さん、今日、日本カトリックカンファレンス2日目にようこそ。講演は間もなく始まります。11時からの予定ですけれども、間もなく始まります。質問などがある方は最後に質問の時間が短いのですけれどもありますので、画面下の Q&A というところから質問をお送りください。よろしくお願いいたします。
So let me also introduce in English, if that's okay.
Please go ahead.
Okay, great. Oops. Okay, so good morning, everybody. I'd like to introduce Dr. Ligaya. Dr. Ligaya Acosta is the Regional Director of Human Life International for the Asia-Oceania region. Human Life International, HLI, is the biggest pro-life and pro-family organization in the world, with headquarters in Virginia, USA. Dr. Ligaya is also co-founder and director of Health Management Consultancy, which he co-founded in the 1990s. Prior to her present work, Dr. Acosta was with the Department of Health in the Philippines for more than 28 years. During all those years, she was a firm believer in population control and an active promoter of contraceptives and sterilization services. Her life changed when she discovered the deadly deception of contraceptives and sterilization services and the myth of population control. Dr. Acosta made a 180 degrees turn to become a staunch pro-life advocate and activist. In recognition of her commitment to pro-life, her archdiocese awarded her a plaque of recognition in 2006, and she was awarded the Father Paul Marks Pro-Lifetime Award from Human Life International. Dr. Acosta has made over 100 mission trips all over the world, spreading the gospel of life.
皆様こんにちは。品川よしこです。今日は4つの福音書について、その中に現れるイエスの。
Dr. Acosta made over 100 mission trips all over the world, spreading the gospel of life. She's also been invited to speak at conferences at the Vatican City in Rome. Dr. Acosta also organizes international congresses, specifically the Human Life International Asia Pacific Congress on Faith, Life, and Family, held in different countries throughout the world. Okay, Zumi.
Okay. 皆様、今日これから講演いただくドクター・リガヤ・アコスタさんはフィリピン出身です。フィリピン保健省のさまざまな役職を28年以上にわたり務められ、2007年からヒューマンライフインターナショナルというカトリックの人の命と家庭の尊厳のために働く世界で最も大きな団体のメンバーとなられ、現在アジア・オセアニアのディレクターをされています。保健省に勤めておられた頃は人口抑制や避妊について支持する立場でいらしたんですけれども、自然な家族計画についての研修担当になり、アメリカで研修を行ったことから、さまざまな人口抑制や避妊などの中絶などの脅威、恐ろしさについて目から鱗のように目覚め、それ以来、家庭と命の尊厳のために100カ国以上講演を行うなど働いておられます。科学的、客観的な事実に基づいて語っておられます。では、今日はイデオロギーによる植民地化の脅威というテーマで話してくださいます。So thank you, Dr. Ligaya. So please start. We can start now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil and Izumi. Good morning, everyone. It's truly a great privilege for me to be able to join you today, even only virtually, to talk on a topic which has been a subject of Pope Francis' public discourses. and it's titled The Threat of Ideological Colonization. Pope Francis, in many of his speeches, has warned that there are ideological colonizations which destroy not with weapons, but with ideas. In fact, in his encounter with families during his pastoral visit to the Philippines, he said, "You were given a role to recognize the dangers to our families and to protect them from new ideologies. There is an ideological colonization for which we have to be careful of those trying to destroy the family." And he specifically mentioned the redefinition of marriage and openness to life. What is ideological colonization? Pope Francis himself answered this in a press conference on the way back to the Vatican, where he said that it is the imposition of foreign ideas into a culture which is sometimes tied with financial assistance. And he even gave an example of a public service officer who sought loans in order to be able to build schools for the poor. She received the money on the condition that she insert a well-prepared book into the curriculum to teach gender theory. And since she needed the money, she said yes. And as a result, the goal of the financiers were achieved. But Pope Francis has repeatedly said that with ideological colonization, freedom is taken away. The history, people's memory is deconstructed, and an educational system is imposed in young people. And again, he gave an example similar to the other one. And in his speech at the 70th session of the United Nations General Assembly, he told the world leaders present that you have a duty to recognize ethical limits, warning that promoting the social progress and better standards of life can risk becoming an unattainable illusion for carrying out an ideological colonization by the imposition of anomalous models and lifestyles, which are alien to people's identity, and in the end, he said, is irresponsible. In many of his speeches, Pope Francis mentions specifically the gender theory. He also mentions the lack of openness to life and relativism. If I will have time, I will discuss all of them with you today. But if not, I will concentrate on gender theory, which he has mentioned many times. He says specifically, today, children are taught in schools that everyone can choose his or her own sex. And he says that the differences between men and women must be recognized and valued. Efforts to convince people that the differences between male and female are simply social conventions which limit individual freedom, ignore the fact that men and women need each other in order to understand themselves. He says differences between man and woman are not of the order of position or subordination, but rather of communion and generation, which is why the human person, male and female, can be said to be made in the image and likeness of God. The complementarity of man and woman, the summit of divine creation, is being questioned by what is called gender ideology in the name of a society which is freer and more just. Gabriel Kubi, in his book, The Global Sexual Revolution, Destruction of Freedom in the Name of Freedom, says it very powerfully. Gender ideology is the deepest rebellion against God that is possible. Man does not accept that he is created as man or woman. No, I decide. This is my freedom, even if it's against experience, against nature, against reason, and against science. It is, she says, the ultimate perversion of individualism. It robs man of the last remnant of his identity, that is to be a man and a woman, after having lost faith and family and nation. It is indeed diabolical, she says, that an ideology which every person can discern as a lie can capture the common sense of people and become the dominant ideology of our time. And we know very well that if it is a lie, like they want to call us men as women or vice versa, we know that it can never come from God, because God never tells lies, only the truth and only what is good. And we know that when it is a lie, it can only come from the father of lies, which is Satan or the devil himself. Pope Benedict XVI spoke of gender ideology as a negative trend for humankind and a profound falsehood. And in fact, in his address to the Roman Curia, he said, according to this philosophy, sex is no longer a given element of nature that man has to accept and personally make sense of. It is a social role that we choose for ourselves, while in the past it was chosen for us by society. And he emphatically said, the profound falsehood of this theory and of the anthropological revolution contained within it is obvious. People dispute the idea that they have a nature given by their bodily identity that serves as a defining element of the human being. They deny their nature and decide that it is not something previously given to them, but that they make it for themselves. Being created by God as male and female pertains to the essence of the human creature. This duality, he says, is an essential aspect of what being human is all about, as ordained by God. And he says, the words of the creation account, male and female, he created them, no longer apply, because now they tell us that it is just a social construct and not a biological reality. Now what applies is this: it was not God who created the male and female. Society did this. Now we decide for ourselves. Man calls his nature into question. And Pope Benedict says it is a negative trend for humankind, though it may be disguised by good feelings in the name of alleged progress, alleged right, or alleged humanism. Thus, the Church reaffirms her great yes to the dignity and beauty of marriage as an expression of the faithful and generous bond between man and woman, and her no to gender philosophies, because the reciprocity between male and female is an expression of the beauty of nature willed by the Creator. He says that when the freedom to be creative becomes the freedom to create oneself, then necessarily the Maker himself is denied, and ultimately man too is stripped of his dignity as a creature of God, as the image of God at the core of his being. Cardinal Javier Lozano Barragan, former head of the Vatican's Council for Pastoral Assistance to Healthcare Workers, says, acting against nature and the dignity of the human body is an insult to God. Of course, God has already made us perfect, and we don't want to accept it. Pope Benedict XVI just tell us thus, it is the duty of the pastors of the church to put the Catholic faithful and every person of goodwill and right reason on guard against the trend of these ideologies. I like what Dr. Anca Maria Cernia said. She's president of the Association of Catholic Doctors of Romania. This ideology calls itself progressive, but it is nothing else than the serpent's offer for man to take control, to replace God, to arrange salvation in this world. It is an error of religious nature. His Eminence, Carlo Cardinal Cafara, former president of the Pontifical Institute of John Paul for Studies of Marriage, said, at the root of this is the work of Satan, who wants to build an actual anti-creation. And he says, this is the ultimate and terrible challenge which Satan is hurling at God. It's like he's saying, I am demonstrating to you that I am capable of constructing an alternative to your creation. And man will say, it's better in the alternative creation than in your creation. In an interview with Pope Francis by Father Luigi Maria Picoco, theologian and popular retreat leader, president of the Fis Itrasio Institute for Religious Studies in Italy, and author of the book San Giovanni Paolo Magno, or Saint John Paul the Great, which was released early this year in February 2020, noted in his series of interviews how often Pope Francis speaks of evil. And thus he asked him where he sees evil is at work today. And Pope Francis said, gender theory is one place. Gender theory has a dangerous cultural aim of erasing all distinctions of male and male, which would destroy at its roots God's most basic plans for human beings, which is diversity and distinction. It would make everything homogeneous or neutral. It is an attack on difference, on the creativity of God, and on men and women. In fact, in a private conversation with Austrian Bishop Andreasson, which he wrote in his essay for the German Catholic news publication cath.net, he shared that Pope Francis, during their Ad Limina visit, told him gender ideology is demonic. And in his article, Austrian Bishop Lon said, indeed, gender ideology is the destruction of persons, which is why Pope Francis was justified in calling it demonic. It asserts that there are not only man and woman, but also other genders. And furthermore, every person can choose his or her own gender. And the other day, I checked in the internet. Oh, wow. There are now 64 terms as of December 20, 2019 that describes gender identity and expression, which is from A to Z. And the article says that it was medically reviewed by a certified sex therapy. Can you imagine that? God created only sex, male, female. As of December 2019, there is now 64. So what is the solution? Is it going to be more reproductive health or gender education? No, it is bringing people back to God, understanding the authentic teachings of the church. We need to evangelize. Evangelization is the solution and conversion. As Pope Benedict says in his letter to the bishops of the Catholic Church on the pastoral care of homosexual persons, no authentic pastoral program will include organizations which sexual persons associate with each other without clearly saying that homosexual activity is immoral. truly pastoral approach, according to Pope Benedict XVI, will appreciate the need for homosexual persons to avoid the near occasions of sin. He also says in that letter, departure from the church's teaching or silence about it in an effort to provide pastoral care is neither caring nor pastoral. Only what is true can ultimately be pastoral. The neglect of the church's position prevents homosexual men and women from receiving the care they need and deserve. And in the official document of the Vatican from the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, titled Considerations Regarding Proposals to Give Legal Recognition to Unions Between Homosexual Persons, it says very clearly, all Catholics are obliged to oppose the legal recognition of homosexual unions, and where such unions are given the legal status and rights that belong to marriage, clear and emphatic opposition is a duty. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, 2357, is very, very clear. It says, there are absolutely no grounds for considering homosexual unions to be in any way similar or even remotely analogous to God's plan for marriage and family. Marriage is holy, while homosexual acts go against the natural law. Homosexual acts close the sexual act to the gift of life. They do not proceed from a genuine affective and sexual complementarity, and thus the Church says under no circumstances can they be approved. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith tells us that the Church teaches that respect for homosexual persons cannot lead in any way to approval of homosexual behavior or legal recognition of sexual unions. The common good requires that laws recognize, promote, and protect marriage as the basis of the family, which is the primary unit of society. Legal recognition of homosexual unions, the Church teaches, or placing them on the same level as marriage would mean not only the approval of deviant behavior with the consequence of making it a model in present-day society, but would also obscure basic values which belong to the common inheritance of humanity. The Church, it says, cannot fail to defend these values for the good of men and women and for the good of society itself. For further readings, you can go to the Vatican website, to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, and this document is still there. It was passed during the pontificate of Saint John Paul II, with Joseph Cardinal as the prefect, who we all know became Pope Benedict XVI. I read a very beautiful document from 500,000 Catholic clergy from the United Kingdom to commit themselves to preaching the truth on danger. They say very beautifully, human being is a unity of body and soul, constituting a single identity that encompasses every aspect of our human being. By contrast, the essence of gender ideology is the claim that our souls or our psychological and spiritual faculties can vary in their sex or gender to that of our healthier functioning bodies. A small minority of people, they acknowledge, do find it difficult to accept their own sex and seek to be identified as members of the opposite sex or even undergo some form of gender reassignment. Such individuals, they say, need to be treated with sensitivity, but also with honesty. A real solution won't be found in rejecting their bodies or medically correcting them, but in addressing the emotional and social factors that really give rise to this disassociation, which is now known as gender dysphoria. They quote from the sacred scripture. Christians believe that the body is fundamentally good and is never a mere shell for our identity. Genesis chapter 1, verse 27 make clear that sexual difference is not an accident. Being a man or a woman is not an accident, but an integral part of God's plan for humanity. True and lasting happiness lies in accepting who is it that God has made for us, for his plans for us are always plans of infinite love. Those who have gender reassignment usually live to regret it. Today, I will give you examples of them, adding that it can have a significant impact on their mental health. Therefore, the most charitable response in this situation is not to encourage a person to transition, but wait, pray, and reflect. This is especially true when it comes to adolescents and young people for whom such an ideology can cause real harm. It is especially unacceptable that children be encouraged to undergo surgery or take hormones. You can watch the video, 60 Minutes Australia, on a transgender boy transitioning to life as a girl, changes his mind. There's a title. This is a video about teenage boy Patrick Mitchell, who took hormones to become a girl, but after 2 years, he realized that he's a boy after all. But the hormone therapy gave irreversible effects to his body. Patrick Mitchell grew up with a single mom, and probably because he didn't have a model of how it is to be a male, he often dressed as a female like his mom, and he took hormones, and his mom actually supported him. But now, after 2 years, Patrick Mitchell says that he realized he could be happy without completely changing who I am. So they went to London, and when this video was made, they were actually in London, because now he wants to transition fully again and being a male. As Professor John Whitehall, an experienced pediatrician, says, it's a normal thing for children to express some confusion about their gender. This confusion, however, often dissipates by the time they reach maturity. Interfering with this natural progression does more to mess them up than it does to help. Ultimately, indeed, we know that it is in the truth of the gospel and through the grace of the sacraments that every human being can find the fulfillment that God intends for them. Look at Jeffrey Johnston. He was a transgender for 22 years, but he found Jesus, and he has been out of this life for 14 years. Or former drag queen Kevin Witt. He admitted that he was a homosexual, transsexual, drag queen, and prostitute 20 years, as you can see in the picture. But then he says he found Jesus and he got himself free. And he says, and I quote, ever since then, my life has been so much better than it ever was. I am so much happier than I ever was. Indeed, as St. Augustine told us, heart will never rest until it rests in the Lord. As the Bible says in Jeremiah, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. You will seek me and find me. When you seek for me with all your heart, I will be found by you and bring you back from captivity. And this is really very personal to me, because for those of you who have heard my talks, you know I was on the other side for 28 years of my life. But God is so good that before I die, He gave me an opportunity to change. And now I can say without batting an eyelash that when you have found God in your life, you shall have found the pearl of great price, and you will be willing to sell your possessions to be able to acquire that pearl of great price. As Archbishop Charles Chaput, Archbishop of Philadelphia, US said, the point is not to challenge what the church believes about human sexuality, but to preach and teach it with confidence, joy, and zeal. Biblical truth liberates. It is never a cause for embarrassment. And as a person who is going on the world with Human Life International to preach the gospel of life, I can say very well that each day of life, I become more and more passionate with this cause, because indeed I have found that there is power in the gospel of life, and we just need to ask God for the grace and the courage to be able to preach it with, even if we are going against the current, because every time I see a lot of conversions. And of course, as was said yesterday by our lovely guests from the Vatican, psychiatry expert Dr. Joseph Berger confirms that the church's position is actually confirmed by science. Dr. Berger is a specialist in psychiatry, certified by the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons of Canada and the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. And he says, from a medical and scientific perspective, there is no such thing as a transgendered person. Terms such as gender expression and gender identity, he says, are at the very least ambiguous and are more an emotional appeal than a statement of scientific fact. He says, quote, people who identify themselves as transgendered are mentally ill or simply unhappy. Hormone therapy and surgery are not appropriate treatments for psychosis and unhappiness. And he says, cosmetic surgery will not change the chromosomes of a human being, in that it will not make a man become a woman capable of menstruating, ovulating, and having children, nor will it make a woman into a man capable of generating sperm that can unite with an egg or ovum from a woman and fertilize that egg to produce a human child. And Dr. Q confirms this. He is a distinguished professor of psychiatry at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, and he is in fact the psychiatrist in chief of Johns Hopkins Hospital. He used to do surgical procedures, and he said he stopped doing the procedures because he found that patients were no better adjusted or satisfied after receiving treatment. He wrote in 2004 that Hopkins was fundamentally cooperating with a mental illness by catering to the desire of people who wanted surgery to change their biological sex. And he says, we psychiatrists, I thought, would do better to concentrate on trying to fix their minds and not their genitalia, to provide a surgical alteration to the body of these unfortunate people was to collaborate with a mental disorder rather than to treat it. Because you see, if you look at the body of homosexual man, woman, it is perfect, nothing it, but it is their mind telling them that they are women in a man's body or vice versa. So indeed, as Dr. Paul McHugh says, we need to concentrate on their minds and not their genitalia. One of the greatest secrets of the LGBT lobby, which they don't want us to know, is that homosexuals can live their lifestyle. Look at the slide. She says, I was here, this fellow said, I found Jesus. And I will give more examples in a little while. Why don't the homosexuals want us to know about this? Because if homosexuals live their lifestyle, it debunks the theory that gays are born that way and is decisively exposed as junk science. Indeed, in my talk on homosexuality, we researched for many years, and even until now, I'm still studying. It has been found that homosexuality is not genetic. It is not by nature, but it is by nurture. There are several factors, according to studies, that are exposing factors to having a man or a woman become a homosexuals. It is politics, not truth, that drives the homosexual agenda. Leading experts in psychiatry and psychology have stated that there are many ex-gays now living happy and normal lives. Look at Walt Heyer on your screen. Walt Heyer, you can read about him in the internet. He is now active in this mission. He lived as Laura here. He lived as Laura for 8 years, and then he had a gender surgery, and then he realized that he wasn't happy. So he has been back to being Walt Heyer again. Or Debbie, who has now transitioned back into being a woman. For years, he had a surgery, transgender surgery, and he lived to being a man. But then he changed his life now, and he says that he realized after counseling why he hated his body as a woman, because he was raped for so many times by his father when he was young. And he thought that if he would not have any more the female reproductive organ, then perhaps he will not be raped anymore. But now, thanks be to God, he is back to being a woman again. Dr. Nicholas Cummings, former president of the American Psychological Association, knows of hundreds of homosexuals who have successfully changed their orientation. And he should know, because he says he and his staff have treated almost 20,000 homosexuals with mental problems, many of whom desired to change their orientation. Indeed, there is a message of hope that we can give to our brother and sister homosexuals. Just as those addicted to drugs or alcohol can free themselves from slavery, so too can homosexuals. They can learn to control themselves and reintegrate themselves into society. Look at Thomas, from lesbianism to follower of Christ. On the left is his picture when he was still a lesbian, and look at him now when he found Jesus, how beautiful she is. Indeed, we human beings are better than animals, but of course, God created us special. If we look at ourselves in the mirror, God created our brains much higher than our genitals. And you know, of course, that God is actually giving us a message in that. We can control ourselves. We can rise above our animal instincts, because by God's wisdom, he gave us intellect and also free will. Healing involves a process of understanding compassionately the emotional hurts they have experienced, resolving the anger with those who have inflicted pain through a process of forgiveness, utilizing cognitive and behavioral techniques, admitting powerlessness over their emotional suffering and relying on God and the sacraments. And the cornerstone to recovery is the combination of forgiveness and spirituality. Only God's love is powerful enough to overcome the painful loneliness and sadness, insecurities and fears by providing a feeling of being deeply loved, special and safe at every life stage. As Pope Francis has said, only God can give us true happiness. It is useless for us to waste our time seeking for it elsewhere, in riches, in pleasures, in power, and in careers. The kingdom of God, he says, is the realization of all our aspirations, because it is at the same time the salvation of man and the glory of God. Let me share with you another favorite verse in the Bible in 2 Corinthians. It says, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. I will all the more gladly boast of my weakness, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong, because he takes over." Question, and I always get this question everywhere I go. But didn't Jesus accept everyone exactly as they were? Yes, indeed. Jesus did accept people as they were, but he also challenged them to change their lives. And these two aspects of his ministry stand in contradiction only if you fail to grasp what motivated his interaction with others. And he did it out of love. That's why he dined with sinners. So let us pray that we can preach the truth with love. And let me bring you to the parable of the adulterous woman. I think this is a good reminder for all of us. The adulterous woman was supposed to be stoned to death for his sin. But Jesus saved the adulterous woman who was about to be killed for her crime by saying, "Let he who is without sin throw the first stone." One by one, the people went away, because nobody is free from sin. We're all sinners. So after that, what did Jesus say? Did Jesus say, "Okay, I have saved you. You can go back to your many men"? No. Jesus also told her, "Go and sin no more." So he's inviting us to change, to convert, to go back to him. And that is the feeling that you and I want to share with people who are still outside the faith. Let me go to the sacredness of life, which Pope Francis has also been saying for time, since time immemorial. We know that killing, murder, is a mortal sin. In fact, in the 10 Commandments, we are told, "Thou shalt not kill." How come? How did it happen that what was once a mortal sin, very, very clearly understood by everyone, has now become legal? And I am referring to abortion. Pope Francis says, abortion suppressed innocent and helpless life in its blossoming. Is it right to take a human life to solve a problem? It's like he says, hiring a hitman. We cannot kill a human being so we can save other people's lives. But I am not saying here that we should discriminate against post-abortive women. No, on the contrary, we need to reach out to them because we tell them about God's mercy, which is infinite. Pope Francis says, one could say that all the evil done in this world is summarized in this: contempt for life. What leads men to reject life, he asks us. They are the idols of money, power, success. These are incorrect parameters to evaluate life, the Pope tells us. The only authentic measure of life, he says, is love. The love with which God loved it. Why? Saint Peter in the gates of heaven will not ask us, do you have a doctorate degree or do you have a master? No, he will just ask us, what good did you do for the Lord? No? So Pope Francis has always said, abortion is always acceptable, regardless of whether a fetus, which is really a baby, is fatally ill or has pathological disorders. So just this to help women bring to term even pregnancies likely to end in the death of a child at birth or soon after. And again, he asked, is it legitimate to take human life to solve a problem? Is it permissible to contract a hand to solve a problem? And Pope Francis says, a decision to abort based on medical information about an ill fetus amounts to inhuman eugenics and deny families the chance to welcome the weakest of children. And I know some people who welcome them and they tell us of their joy and gratefulness for accepting children. Using abortion, the Pope says, as a mode of prevention could never be condoned, and that such position has nothing to do with faith. Pope Francis says, human life is sacred and inviolable, and the use of prenatal diagnosis for selected purposes should be discouraged with strength. In his address to the United Nations, he called for respect for the sacredness of every human life, of every man, every woman, the poor, the elderly, the sick, the unborn and unemployed, the abandoned, those considered disposable because they are only considered a part of the state. He tells us, be sanctuaries of respect for life, proclaiming the sacredness of every human life from conception to natural death. And this has been a constant teaching of the church, as Father Boki yesterday, John the 23rd, from its very inception, you was the creating hand of God. Saint Paul the Great says, life, especially human life, belongs only to God. For this reason, whoever has human life in some way at God himself. So I have 4 minutes. Let me go to relativism. Pope Francis has said, Christianity is threatened by rampant relativism. He says, we live in times of rampant relativism that undermines of faith at its base and strips the very idea of Christian fidelity of its meaning. Pope says, relativism, which considers all opinions as true even if they are contradictory, is the greatest problem of our time. He says, to say that there really is a truth, a binding and valid truth in history, in the person of Jesus Christ, in the faith of the church, is considered fundamentalism and is presented as a genuine attack against the manifold modern spirit and as a threat against its supreme good, tolerance and freedom. Yet he's to renounce the truth does not save man. On the contrary, Christian faith impels inexorably toward the question of truth, keeping in mind that truth does violence to no one. Only if the Christian truth does it concern all men. Otherwise, it would only be a simple expression of culture. I think I no longer have time. So please let me quote the opening statement of Joel 2's Veritatis Splendor, or the splendor of truth. It says, the splendor of truth shines forth in all the works of the Creator, and in a special way in man, created in the image and likeness of God. Truth enlightens man's intelligence and shapes his freedom, leading him to know and love the Lord. The sun rays, light of your face, shine on us, Lord. And before I finally go, I would like to ask everyone to please do this survey for HLI. And if you want to receive, to be updated with us, to receive documents from us, please do this survey. You can take a photo of it, then go to the website. Thank you very, very much, everyone. God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ligaya. Thank you very, very much. I think we actually have a question from one of the persons, one of our attendees. May I ask you this question? If time, would you comment on UNESCO Comprehensive Sex Education Program? Is it being implemented in the Catholic schools? And that's from Vince.
Indeed, it is sad. Even in Catholic schools, they are teaching sex education. I actually have a separate talk on this, a very beautiful which I titled Sex Education, Illusion and Destruction. I hope one day you can actually hear this talk also, because teaching about sex without value formation is indeed very unfortunate. What we need to teach our children the truth and meaning of human sexuality. And there is a beautiful document from the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith on this. Thank you.
There's a second question. So let me see. Hi, Dr. Acosta. Thanks for an amazing talk. I'm from the Philippines, and I was wondering if you think, we as Catholics should refrain from using certain linguistic terms like LGBTQ. I remember my parish priest telling me not to use such language, no matter how innocuous, is akin to capitulating to these ideologies.
I agree with your parish priest. We need to start calling people again as a man or a woman, so that we will not become conduits of the LGBT lobby. Thank you.
That question was from Felix Javier. I think he was with us also yesterday. Thank you, Felix.
Oh, and he's from the Philippines. Hello, my fellow Filipinos. Thank you so much for being here.
Great.
The first question was from Vince.
Vince, yeah.
I don't know where he is.
Hello, Vince. Thank you so much for all your questions.
May I ask a question, Doctor?
Sure, sure.
With your slide, when the person was holding the sign that said, I was queer and then I found Jesus, and you know, I was just struck that in big bold letters at the top it said you can change. Or how do we approach people that when we say something like that to them, it's like we set their hair on fire. They get so emotional and react so viscerally to that. Do you have any input for that?
Yes, I have actually counseled many homosexual persons, and I have actually given talks to many of them also. But before we do that, we need to spend so much time in prayer. Go to Mass, do adoration, go to the Blessed Sacrament, and then we need to also confess so that Satan will not have a window or a door to blackmail us. And let me tell you that I become very, very passionate because these people, once they hear my talk, they tell me, it's only now I understand why I became like this. Because indeed, there are predisposing factors. And one of that is actually father hunger. Today, we have what we call as orphans living with, orphans with living parents because of divorce or separation. And so we deprive our children of models of how it is to become a man or a woman. So after praying so hard, then we talk to them and we bring them back to their past so that we will see what are really the factors that, I forgot, we need to pray and fast a lot. In fact, on the mission for life and family, we can never be successful without the Lord, without prayer and fasting. I've never been as prayerful as when I became pro-life. And let me tell you, if we counsel them with love, let them realize that we are here to accompany them because the teaching of the church is actually very, very clear that even if it says that homosexuality is actually an intrinsic disorder, there is no way that you can write it. There is no way that it can be approved. The church actually says also that they should not be discriminated against. So we welcome them, we accompany them with love. But as the 500 priests from the United Kingdom said, this accompaniment with sensitivity and love should also be accompanied with honesty. You see, in the beginning, I always have to pray that the Lord take over me because my voice is really, I was once given the award for best debater, and so I've always been passionate, and so I always ask God to please through me so I can speak with love, so that these people will realize that we are here for them because the church is here for them. And I have realized I hug them. Actually, I hug them also so that they will realize that we're not discriminating against them. We love them, but then we need to let them realize that they're living in sin and they can actually change. And I share with them the many scientific facts, which I actually discuss in my talks, homosexuality, a Catholic and scientific perspective, and give them a lot of models. And we have plenty. We have plenty of models. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. There's 3 more questions and 3 more minutes.
So quickly choose one. Let's see, for Paul from Paul, in my company, more than 30,000 employees are working. We found out that that the rate of LGBTQ in my company is around 2%. Do you think we need more activities of LGBTQ in our company?
I don't think so, because if you will have a special activity for them, you are actually encouraging them to remain in that sinful state. You know, we in the Catholic Church, we are more concerned of the sanctification of souls. And if we encourage them to be LGBT, to live it like it is, then we are encouraging them to live in sin. So I think there is really no need for them to be labeled as a separate one, because God did not do it. So we were all created men and women. So I don't agree. Thank you so much.
Quickly, one more question. This is from Hideo Ishi Ajabar. Thank you for your talk. Can you elaborate a little bit more about the current situation, Catholic education teachings in the Philippines? I live in the USA. My husband is from the Philippines. God bless.
Yeah, in the Philippines, we also have a lot of challenges. Do you know why? Because the Philippines is a Catholic country, the only Catholic country, in fact, in Asia. And so because we are a Catholic country, the international peddlers of the culture of death, divorce, euthanasia, abortion, total population control, and homosexuality have actually given a lot more money to the Philippines for government and non-government organizations. And I know this very well because, as I was telling you, I had also a consultancy, and there's a lot of money on the other side. And so therefore, many government and non-government organizations fall into the trap because we want the money, as Pope Francis said. But what is good in the Philippines is we have a lot of pro-life groups, a lot of pro-lifers. We in the Philippines is also very active here. I mean, we at Human Life International is also very active in the Philippines. And to us, silence is never an option. So we continue our public information campaign. We continue conducting congresses on faith, life, and family. And in fact, the next Asia Pacific Congress on Faith, Life, and Family, which was held in Kerala early this year in January in India, is going to be held in Cebu City next year. Please help us pray that COVID-19 will not be in the world anymore during the time. And I'm inviting you to come. I promise you that just like the rest who have attended the ASPACs, it is going to be a life-changing experience for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ligaya. Can we accommodate just one more question?
Sure.
It's also from Felix from the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
I have a man-to-woman transsexual friend who's returned to the church a few years ago. My friend, however, is scared to do detransition surgery because of a lot of other surgeries that person had gone through previously. What would be the best course for the church in situations such as these?
Well, we can encourage him to really welcome the person back to the church, go to the church, do adoration, and he can actually be a very, very good speaker on the subject, because wounded healers like me can actually be very powerful, because then we can actually share the experience, just as what Walt Heyer is doing right now. He gives talks and many others. He gives talks and he writes a lot in the internet, and there's a lot of them. So we welcome them so much. And if he doesn't want the transition surgery, then he can remain as such, but be active in this mission to open the eyes of the people to the truth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ligaya. So let us keep in mind the invitation to ASPAC and pray for it to be held next year.
We need a lot of prayers. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Dr. Ligaya. Fantastic. And thank you for bringing this truth to us all here. And I've got a call coming in, but sorry, Izumi-san, can you
yes,
take over the conversation, please, and present our final greetings to Dr. Ligaya. And hopefully we'll see you in the coming year, Dr. Ligaya, back in Japan.
Yes, thank you so very much. And thank you for having me. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, have a nice day. It was really, truly informative for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless.
リガヤ博士、ありがとうございました。本当にとても私たちにとって知識と情報をたくさん得ることができたと思います。ありがとうございました。